Sue Nagle is a partner and co-head of the television department at the United Talent Agency. She juggles that with being the mother to two girls she and her husband, actor-comedian Dana Gould, adopted from China a few years ago. We sat down at her home and talked about why she considers herself a work in progress. Sue, thanks so much for letting me invade your house at this early hour this morning.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for coming over.
You know, it's almost a Hollywood cliche. You know, starting in the mailroom, working your way to the top, becoming a partner at the firm. What made you want to be an agent?
Well, truthfully, I didn't exactly know what an agent did. When I entered into the mailroom, I had an idea about it from my interview, but I had moved out to California. I was the oldest kid in my family, and I really needed to pay my rent. And so everyone had said, try working in an agency mailroom. You'll get a great overview of the business, and that's kind of how it started.
But you were a communications major at Indiana. You could have gone in any direction. You could have written advertising copy. You could have gone to work for a big company. So what was the lure of Hollywood? What was it that brought you out here, really?
Well, I love television, and I grew up watching a lot of television. And you know, most of the production is out in Los Angeles. It's not really in New York. Plus, there was no way I could have really afforded to live in New York, so that wasn't an option. So moving out to Los Angeles, everything is around you. Every show is in production. Things are moving, and it seemed as if I would find the right match somewhere.
Well, you are in a 24/7 kind of world, so I wonder, how do you manage to carve out time, and how do you maintain your femininity in a world that's known for ruthlessness and hard tactics?
You know, it's similar to how I approach motherhood. I do it my way. And early on, I think a lot of people looked and thought, I don't really understand her. She's really not like other agents. She's not too much. And I couldn't worry about what everyone else thought. And I listened to everyone's advice because, of course, I was open to it. But at the end of the day, I had to do what worked for me. I was surprised and thrilled that it worked out well. But I also needed to be comfortable to do my job well, and I didn't want to be somebody that I knew I wasn't. So.
But that's an amazing amount of self-confidence to have, if you don't mind my saying so, for somebody so young.
Oh.
Where did you come to that feeling that it's okay, I am who I am, and if I am who I am, it will win out?
Well, I was promoted really early on. I was 24 when I became an agent, and you know, 24-year-olds, I look back at myself and I kind of laugh because I really didn't even know exactly who I was or what I was doing. But I knew that I cared about the people I was working with. I was signing a lot of writers that I was friends with, and so I was automatically invested in their success because I cared about them personally so much. And it started working.
What challenges did you really meet along the way? Were there a lot of people who were poo-pooing you, saying women don't make good agents, why would you want to do this?
Well, I was fortunate because my company was very small, and there were some female partners that were amazing. I mean, within the first few years that I was there, we merged with the talent department and brought in two female partners who were also mothers. So I had great role models. I wasn't really sure if it would ultimately be the right match, but the man who promoted me was one of my mentors, a man named Gavin Pallone, who was very kind of famous. He's big personality and really not afraid to be who he is. Said, we're going to take a shot on you. I don't know if it's going to work out. I have a feeling it will. And by the way, you need to get a pair of high heels and a skirt because you dress like you're still in college. And that was great advice, and it was true.
So you went out and got a new wardrobe.
I did. A few pieces.
Continued to read the recycling, and the rest is history.
And the rest is history, right.
Okay, so now you're one of a few women on the management team.
Right.
What kind of challenges does that present as you sit around the table with the guys all day?
Well, women definitely have a different perspective. You know, they think more about corporate culture in a significant way. Everyone likes to talk about corporate culture, but I think women understand it a little bit. They understand how everyone might feel in an environment, where men look and make sure that the holiday party is a success and that we're all doing the right things. Women have a feeling that it's either a constructive environment or a negative one. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that. The other women that are partners come at it, we have an unspoken bond at the table. We tend to see things from the same perspective, which is helpful.
Do you back each other up?
Yes. I feel you have to support other women, and so even if I disagree, I try to disagree privately.
A lot of what you do is nurturing. So a lot of what you do is mothering. I'd like to make that comparison. Is being an agent like being a mother?
I think the best parts of it are, the most rewarding parts of being an agent are finding someone, reading something that you love, and thinking to yourself, oh, I'm so excited to be associated with someone this talented. I'm so excited to support them. That is a lot about being, that takes a very nurturing side of you.
And you're involved with a lot of hip young shows that people can turn on and watch. They can see The Loop, they can see One Tree Hill, they can see Men in Trees. What was the most difficult show to get on the air, and why? And what's the process?
It's different for every show. Every show has casting challenges. The director plays an important part in whether or not it moves forward. It has to be at the right network, be the right fit. The stars have to, I always say that at the end of a successful show, of course you can look back and say, in my opinion, it starts with the script, but it also has to do with the chemistry of the actors, the right network at the right time slot, and the support from the network and making sure it stays a hit, which is, in this environment, very important.
And you said 98% failure rate.
98% failure rate from script pitch to series, yes. It's a debilitating process.
So how do you stay up about it all?
Well, the best thing about television is it's cyclical and it's fast. So you have the ability towards the end of the year, when you're wiping your tears, you have a few days until you have to get up and start all over again. And most television writers tend to be pretty resilient.
Let's shift a little to your husband, who is also a writer, a producer, an actor.
But not my client.
But not your client. Dana Gould, who's an incredibly talented man. So is having a sense of humor really important?
Yes. Well, I love comedy, so that's the good news. But yeah, he's a comedian and he's endlessly funny. We made a careful choice early on not to mix too much work into our romance, which was important. But having a sense of humor in my job, you need it. And having a sense of humor at home with a comedian as a husband, you definitely need it.
Did you tell the reporters that we make our own rum in the bathtub?
I can't see. It's too dark.
It is too dark. Hit that button in the middle.
Are you a funny lady?
I may have thought I was funny, but not compared to Dana, no.
So there's only one funny person in a household?
I think you need one person who's really funny and one who appreciates humor.
So here you are, how many years later?
11.
Well,
I said that like it's a life sentence. It kind of is.
Well,
no, it's been 11 years, yeah, since we met, but 6.5 since we've been married.
and do you find that you really do try to keep work out of the relationship at home? Do you totally turn off Hollywood talk and keep it out of the home, out of the bedroom?
I try to. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I am a bit of a workaholic, and I'm thinking about work a lot of the time. I try not to keep my BlackBerry in the bedroom. I try not to constantly look at my BlackBerry. And when I'm thinking about work, I try to bring it into our own conversation, and then I can kind of talk it through, and then we can put it aside. But it's a challenge for us both, because he tries not to come home and talk too much about his job either. This is the piece that goes inside. It's called Two Princess Tales.
Two Princess Tales? What's Two Princess Tales?
This is the story.
We need to put the little game in, silly.
Oh, look. Touch go. Okay, here we go. Ready? See?
You and Dana decided to adopt a baby girl, and you went to China in 2003, brought back number 1. You have number 2, and you're soon to go back to bring home another. What led you in the direction to make that decision? Can you really share about that?
I was a childhood cancer survivor, and I knew I wouldn't be able to have my own children. So growing up, having that knowledge, in a way, is a blessing, because you can look at families differently from an early age. And my parents were great about introducing different kinds of families and how we spoke about families. My mom had sent me an article about the one-child policy in China and the mostly little girls who were waiting to be adopted there. And something about the article that she sent, which was before we were even married, stuck with me. And so when we were really ready, my mind was set. And thankfully, Dana was as passionate about it as I was.
And what was the process like? Because I imagine it's very, very difficult. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of waiting, there's a lot of anticipation and fear.
There was. The paperwork is tedious, not the way that most people think about putting their family together, but there's a lot of fingerprints and interviews and notarization, and that's how that goes. And then you wait, and then you try to be patient. And then in our case, with our first daughter, Lulu, there was the SARS epidemic, which prevented us from being able to go into China for extra 2 months. But we dreamed about her. We couldn't wait to have her. We had her picture, and we stared at it all the time. And then eventually we made the trip. And then the second time, we brought my parents, and we brought my first daughter. And that was really magical. It was really fun.
So here they are, exposed to American culture in a place that defines it, Hollywood. How do you keep them connected with their Chinese culture, and is that important to you?
It's important to me that they know and they learn about China, but it's important that they learn at their own pace. There's a lot of, just like in motherhood in general, there's a lot of, everyone has an opinion about adoption, about how you put your family together, about where you adopt from, about what you do once you're back. And with us, we talk a lot about being from China, being born in China. We keep it simple and age appropriate. And when she asks questions, which mostly my older daughter now, we answer them. When she asks if she was born in my tummy, I say that she was born in another woman's tummy, but she's still my daughter, and this is what we did. And we look at the pictures and we go back through it. And she's curious, but she's going at her own comfort level. In
an earlier email to me, you wrote, "As a latchkey child of the 70s, I thought I knew exactly what to expect. Now I laugh at the old idealistic me. I do love my children, and I do love my job, but I consider myself a work in progress to be sure." So what about having it all? What would you tell other young women?
I would say that expecting women in the generation behind us, and in my generation now, to expect them to have it all is setting everyone up for failure, and failure from the outside and your own sense of personal failure. I think it's really difficult. I've called myself a professional plate spinner, and the plates are crashing all the time. I do as much as I can do, and I try to do it with happiness and to be thankful for what I have. But it's hard to, it would be irresponsible for me to look at a woman who's 20 and say to her, "Hey, guess what? It's going to be great. You're going to have a great job, a great marriage, and your children are going to be wonderful. It's all going to work out nicely for you. I can see into the crystal ball, and it's going to be fine." It's impossible. It's really difficult. Every day has its own set of challenges. Every day I feel like I've done not enough in one area, and I try. I'm so hard on myself. I try to do everything perfectly all the time, and it's silly. But
what does Dana say about all that? Does he tell you to lighten up and get a grip?
I think he finds it charming, but he also thinks I spend too much time worrying about things that don't matter. And I really think that probably the message in there is to every woman needs to prioritize.
You had it. Right, press that in. Now go down 2, roll it down. My God, you're doing so good. Roll it down one more time. Press it in. Yep, just press the wheel. Press it again. No, up. Press. Now you just gotta wait a minute, and when that is done turning, it'll be a picture of you and Alice.
Alright.
You have to understand, Lulu, that being in tune with gadgets is much more important than any sort of human communication.
Lost his favorite kite.
So if you were going to give or follow one piece of advice to yourself or to others, what would it be?
I think for women, you need to be kind to each other and to yourself. I think I try to see that every woman, whether they're working or not working, a mom or not a mom, on their journey, it's difficult, it's hard, and you have to remember to love yourself and to support other women.
Beinecke began working at the Natural Resources Defense Council as an intern in the 1970s. Today, she's their president. I caught up with her here at the NRDC headquarters to talk about global warming, being green, why we should care about the environment, and more importantly, what we can all do to help. Frances, you list your profession as environmentalist. What do people think when they see that?
I think there was a time where people thought, oh, environmentalist, you're a radical from the left. Now people think, oh, you're working to save the planet, and they think that's a good thing. I think it's changed over time, over the period that I've done this.
I was thinking about that because you graduated from college in the 70s and got your master's in the 70s. And that was a time when people used to think that environmentalists were hippies and tree huggers.
And we were.
Well,
that was accurate at the time.
But
we've grown up.
You have a lot to manage. I'd like to talk about NRDC for a minute.
NRDC is a place of people with terrific talent and expertise, and we're an organization largely of lawyers and scientists and policy experts. They know what they want to do and how to get it done. Our job is to make that possible for them. So to create the systems and get the resources and really, in some ways, let them loose. And I think that's the most, that's what I can do to help them in the greatest way. They work collaboratively and well together because they have a mission that really fires them all up. And that's very, very
exciting.
It's exciting, and it gives you a common purpose. We're just about to go to a staff retreat, which we have for every 2 years, when we all come together from around now the world, because we have an office in Beijing.
Well, let's talk about Beijing for a minute. Why China? Of all the countries in the world, you could have gone to India, you could have gone to Europe.
China has the biggest and will have the biggest environmental footprint of any country on the planet. Right now they have the most people. They're soon going to surpass us in global warming emissions. They're really manufacturing so many of the things that we're using here. So it's really our demand that's creating a lot of the pollution there, because they're making the things that we're buying. So we felt that if we're going to go abroad and open another office, we wanted to be at where we think ground zero is for environmental issues.
Polls show that global warming, climate change, is considered to be such a big issue that people can't get their arms around it. They say, well, I'm just one person, what can I do? What do you tell people they can do to make a difference?
Well, I think there are two things that you could do. There are things in your own lives and remember, global warming pollution comes from power plants and cars and the energy embedded in buildings. So everybody uses energy, they drive cars, and they live in a house. In all those three sectors, you could do things from changing your light bulbs to getting a more energy efficient car, to being sure that your home is insulated correctly or that your thermostat is turned to an appropriate level. So there's plenty of things that you could do in your daily life if you think about it. But beyond that, I think it's very important for people to hold elected officials accountable at all levels of government.
Accountability, which brings me to a letter on the NRDC website in January '06, which you wrote following Hurricane Katrina, and you cautioned that this is what the future will look like due to global warming. Obviously, you still feel this way.
I do. I had an occasion to go to New Orleans last March and lead a group through what were then still the devastation caused by Hurricane Katrina. And although we've had a lot of hurricanes, I think that the data is really in that the increased warming of the oceans, which is a result of increased temperatures and global warming, is a direct contributor to storms of greater intensity like Hurricane Katrina. So this is something that we really could look at many more of these going down the road. And I think, Katrina woke up a lot of people about the very severe consequences that we could face as a country and as a planet. Between the tsunami and the hurricane, I mean,
they're at the mercy.
Communities devastated with very little to bring to bear to solve the problem. So that's why the issue is so important. The issue of global warming is really fundamentally a human problem. It's an environmental problem that will have grave consequences for our ecosystems, but even more so, it'll have grave consequences for people who depend on those ecosystems, like all of us.
Let's go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
You graduate from Yale, you get your master's in forestry and environmental studies, and during that time you were an intern for the same organization that you're working for today. Let's talk about the progress there.
You know, it's very interesting. I was lucky to come as an intern when I was still in graduate school, and NRDC started in 1970. That was in 1973. So I feel that I was very, very fortunate to come in on the ground floor of a fantastic and enormously effective organization on a critical issue, you know, at the beginning of really the development of the movement. So in many ways, I've grown up and matured as the movement has as well, and as NRDC is.
But during that time, you managed to get married, and you had 3 daughters. And at one point, you decided to take time off to be with them. What made you make that decision?
Well, what happened to me was I had my first daughter in 1980, and I worked part-time after she was born. And then in 1983, it turned out very shortly before I delivered again, it turned out I was having twins, which I did not know about until just the last second. That would not happen now, but it did happen then. So suddenly I had 3 children under 3, and honestly, you can't manage a job, in my view, or at least I couldn't manage a job and 3 young children. So I thought, well, this is a good time to really spend time with them. And during that period, I was fortunate enough to maintain my affiliation with a number of organizations as an active volunteer and board member. So I didn't walk away from the environment. I just engaged in a very different way on a much more flexible schedule.
And did you find that rewarding? Would you advise young women to take some time like that today?
Well, you know, I think everybody has to make their own decision and what works for them. I found it enormously rewarding. I mean, you know, I loved it.
Did they look back and say, oh, Mom always worked?
I would say they would say that, yes.
When you went back to work, did you find it difficult to juggle these 3 daughters in school and a husband and your career?
Well, first of all, my husband's wonderful and very, I mean, you know, everybody needs to pitch in, and he's been terrific the whole way. And, you know, as my responsibilities at NRDC has increased over the time, my family has been incredibly supportive of that. And, you know, they've known about it and they've endorsed it, even though it has been difficult for them. But, you know, I think for the most part, they're very proud of me and of the issues that I work on. They care deeply about them, and they're great proselytizers to their friends for why this is an important issue, and they've engaged them as Biogems Defenders, which is one of our activist groups. And so, you know, I think it's worked pretty well. I mean, I'm sure that they have plenty to complain about, but for the most part, I think it's been a success.
On balance, it's okay.
Yeah, I think, I mean, now I'm looking back on it, you know, I do know that, you know, it is very hard to work full-time and then, you know, try to make sure you're there for all the school activities and be with them. And, you know, you feel stretched all the time. It is true when they went to college, I felt, you know, less pulled in a million directions, but it's all good.
It's all good. Do you ever wonder about the choices women have made throughout history? I have some stories for you. The work of author Toni Morrison explores the experience of Black women in our culture. Morrison has been awarded the Pulitzer Prize and the Nobel Prize for Literature. What most people don't know is that Toni Morrison never set out to be a writer, and the decision to follow the calling was difficult. I had to make adjustments, she said. I always thought that women could do a lot of things. They went to church, managed their houses, managed other people's houses, raised their children and other people's children, and they taught. I wouldn't say it's not hard, she quipped, but why wouldn't it be? All important things are hard. All important things are hard. 5 words worth remembering. We have all kinds of interesting information to share with you on our website, balancingyourlifeonline.com. I'm Ellen Susman. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time.
Balancing Your Life is made possible in part by the Lee and Joseph D. Jamail Foundation, J.P. Morgan Chase, Sarah S. Morgan, Fred Barron and Lisa Blue. Additional funding is provided by the Laurie M. Tisch Foundation, Andrea and Jim Gordon, Goldman Sachs, Amagi Bank, I.W. Marks Jewelers, Terrell W. and Joan B. Oxford, and others. For a complete list, visit us at www.balancingyourlifeonline.com.